They say the smartest person in the room is rarely the one doing the talking. Usually, they're the one pouring the water. In 2024, Arthur Hemlock, a billionaire hedge fund manager known for tearing startups apart, walked into Le Ciel in Manhattan looking for a fight. He thought he found an easy victim in a tired 30-year-old waitress named Mina. He mocked her, humiliated her, and then challenged her to a math test that would have stumped his own CFO. He expected her to cry. Instead, she picked up a red pen, looked him dead in the eye, and didn't just solve the equation. She dismantled his entire ego in front of the city's elite. This is the story of how the invisible woman silenced the loudest man in New York. The dinner rush at Le Ciel wasn't just a shift, it was a battlefield. Located on the 45th floor of a skyscraper overlooking Central Park, the restaurant didn't just sell steaks, it sold superiority. The air smelled of truffle oil, expensive cologne, and the distinct metallic scent of anxiety. Mina Miller adjusted her apron, hiding a coffee stain near the hem. At 29, she had the kind of face that people trusted, but rarely remembered. Pale features, hair pulled back in a severe, functional bun, and eyes that always seemed focused on something 1,000 miles away. To the patrons of Le Ciel, she was furniture. A robotic arm that delivered filet mignon and refilled sparkling water. Table 4 needs a refill on the 82 Margot, Mina. Move it, Greg, the floor manager, hissed into her ear. Greg was a man who wore suits that were slightly too shiny and possessed a smile that never reached his predatory little eyes. He treated the staff like malfunctioning appliances. On it, Greg, Mina said, her voice flat. She didn't have the energy to fake enthusiasm tonight. Her rent was 3 days late, her landlord was threatening eviction, and her mother's medical bills were sitting in a stack on her kitchen counter, a paper tower of doom that grew taller every month. She moved through the dining room with practiced grace, dodging buses and balancing a silver tray. She was invisible. She preferred it that way. Being seen meant being questioned, and Mina had spent the last 2 years running from questions. "Excuse me," a customer snapped as she passed, not even looking up from his phone. "More bread." "Of course, sir." She was a ghost in a waistcoat. But tonight, the haunting was about to be interrupted. At 8:15 p.m., the elevator doors slid open with a heavy whoosh, and the atmosphere in the restaurant shifted instantly. It was a tangible drop in pressure. Heads turned. Conversations stalled. Arthur Hemlock walked in. You didn't need to read the Wall Street Journal to know Hemlock. He was the CEO of Hemlock Capital, a man who had made $3 billion by shorting the housing market and another $2 billion by gutting pharmaceutical companies. He was 55, silver-haired, tanned from a weekend in St. Bart's, and wearing a bespoke navy suit that cost more than Mina's entire education. He wasn't alone. He was flanked by 3 younger men, his wolf pack. There was Preston, a slick-haired VP who laughed too loud, David, a nervous-looking analyst clutching a tablet, and a third man Mina didn't recognize who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Greg, the manager, practically sprinted to the host stand, sweating. "Mr. Hemlock, we weren't expecting you until 9, but we have your table ready. The best view in the house." Hemlock didn't even look at Greg. He just kept walking, shedding his overcoat into the arms of a scrambling hostess without breaking his stride. "I want the corner booth, and tell the kitchen if the ribeye is over medium rare this time. I'm buying this building and firing everyone." The group laughed. Greg laughed hardest, a desperate, choking sound. "Mina!" Greg snapped his fingers, signaling her over. "Table 1, VIP. Do not, I repeat, do not mess this up. If his water glass drops below half full, you're done. Understand?" Mina looked at the corner booth. Hemlock was already loudly criticizing the wine list, his voice booming across the hush of the room. "I understand," Mina said, gripping her ordering pad. Her knuckles were white. She approached the table. Hemlock was in the middle of a story, gesturing with a breadstick. "So I told the board, you can look at the EBITDA all you want, but the decay rate on that asset is logarithmic. If you don't dump it by Q3, you're holding a burning bag of dog excrement." Preston roared with laughter. "You're a savage, Arthur, a total savage." Mina stepped into the gap in the conversation. "Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Mina, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. Can I start you off with—" Hemlock held up a hand, silencing her without looking at her. He continued staring at David, the nervous analyst. "David, run the numbers again. I don't trust that projection." I did, Arthur. The volatility index is... The volatility is irrelevant if the underlying yield is garbage." Hemlock slammed his hand on the table, making the silverware jump. Mina stood there, frozen. This was the dance. Wait until the king acknowledges the peasant. She waited 10 seconds. 20. Finally, Hemlock turned his head slowly, his ice-blue eyes boring into her. He looked her up and down, analyzing her like a distressed asset. "Sparkling water," he said dismissively. "4 glasses, and bring me the sommelier. I don't want to talk to a waiter about wine." "Right away, sir," Mina said softly. As she turned to leave, she heard Preston whisper loudly, "Where do they find these people? She looks like she's attending a funeral." "Minimum wage, minimum effort, Preston," Hemlock replied, loud enough for her to hear. "That's why they serve the food, and we buy the restaurants." Mina stopped. A familiar, cold fire ignited in her chest. It was a feeling she hadn't felt in years. It was the feeling of a variable being placed in the wrong part of an equation. She took a breath, swallowed the retort, and walked to the bar. "Just get through the night," she told herself. "Just get the tip." By 9:30 p.m., Table 1 had consumed 3 bottles of a 2005 Petrus, 2 seafood towers, and 4 dry-aged ribeyes. They were loud, obnoxious, and the center of the room's reluctant attention. Mina was exhausted. Every time she approached the table, Hemlock found a new way to demean her. He complained the ice was too cloudy. He made her recite the daily specials 3 times because he wasn't listening the first 2 times. He treated her not as a human, but as a dull app on a slow phone. But as she refilled their water for the 10th time, she couldn't help but overhear their conversation. They weren't talking about sports or women anymore. They were talking about a merger, specifically a hostile takeover of a mid-sized tech firm called Viridian Dynamics. "The valuation is all wrong," David, the nervous analyst, was saying, sweating through his shirt. "Arthur, look, the PE ratio is inflated because of their Q4 liquidations. If we buy at $45 a share, we're overpaying by 12%. Hemlock swirled his wine, looking bored. "You're thinking small, David. I don't care about the PE ratio. I care about the tax write-off on the debt restructuring. If we leverage the buyout against their European holdings, we save—" "What? Preston?" Preston fumbled with his phone calculator. Give me a second. It's complex. The European tax credit is 14% on assets over 50 million, but there's the currency drag." Mina hovered near the table, holding a bottle of sparkling water. Her brain, dormant for so long, suddenly woke up. The numbers floated in the air like dust motes. Assets over 50 million, 14% credit. Currency drag EUR USD is currently 1.08. The debt load is likely structured in tranches. She inadvertently lingered a second too long. Hemlock snapped his head up. "Excuse me? Are we boring you? Or are you trying to glean stock tips to share with your busboy boyfriend?" The table erupted in laughter. Mina's face burned. "No, sir. I was just waiting to see if you wanted coffee." "I don't want coffee," Hemlock sneered. "I want competence, something seemingly in short supply here." He gestured to the empty wine bottle. "We're done. Bring the check. And don't expect 20%. You hovered like a vulture all night." Mina nodded stiffly. "I'll bring that right out." She walked to the POS terminal, her hands shaking. She wasn't shaking from fear. She was shaking from rage. She printed the bill. It was astronomical. $14,250.65. She placed the black leather folder on the table. Hemlock snatched it up. He opened it, scanned the receipt, and his eyes narrowed. A cruel smile curled on his lips. This was his favorite game. He pulled a gold fountain pen from his jacket pocket. "You know," Hemlock said, his voice dropping to a theatrical volume that the surrounding tables could hear. "I bet you think this job is hard. Carrying plates, remembering who ordered the salad." He looked at Mina. "But let's see if you have a brain in that head, or if it's just full of hairspray." He tapped the receipt. "Here's the deal. I'm a gambling man. The bill is 14 whites at 250 or 65 $. He wrote a number on the napkin. "I'm going to add a tip that brings the total to a specific round number, but the tip is based on a chaotic percentage linked to the current yield of the 10-year Treasury bond multiplied by the number of people at this table." Preston chuckled. "Arthur, don't break her." Hemlock ignored him. "Listen closely, Waitress. The 10-year Treasury is currently at 4.25%. There are 4 of us. I want to leave a tip that is exactly equal to the square of the number of people here, multiplied by the yield, expressed as a percentage of the pre-tax total. But here is the catch." He leaned in, his eyes gleaming with malice. "You have to tell me the exact total amount. Bill plus tip, right now. No calculator. No writing it down. If you get it right within 5 seconds, I'll tip you 5,000. Cash, right now." The restaurant went silent. Nearby tables stopped eating. Greg, the manager, was watching from the shadows, looking terrified. "And if I get it wrong?" Mina asked, her voice surprisingly steady. "If you get it wrong," Hemlock grinned, "you pay for the wine. That's, let's check, 9,000, which I assume means you'll be washing dishes here until you're 70. "Arthur, come on, that's illegal," David whispered. "It's a verbal contract," Hemlock barked. "She accepts or she admits she's stupid and walks away with 0 tip. Well, what's it going to be, honey?" Mina looked at the bill. $14,250.65. She looked at Hemlock. She saw the arrogance, the assumption that she was nothing. She remembered the nights studying actuarial tables until her eyes bled. She remembered the scholarship to MIT she had to turn down because her mum got sick. She remembered the life she lost. She looked at the gold pen in his hand. "Repeat the variables," Mina said. Her voice changed. The subservience was gone. It was replaced by the cold, hard steel of a mathematician. Hemlock blinked, surprised by her tone. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," Mina said, stepping closer to the table. She didn't look like a waitress anymore. She looked like a predator. "Repeat the variables. Square of the diners, multiplied by the yield, applied to the pre-tax or post-tax?" Hemlock frowned. "Pre-tax. The pre-tax subtotal is $12,800 exactly. 10-year yield is 4.25%. 4 diners. 5 seconds starts now," Hemlock taunted. The room held its breath. Mina didn't blink. She didn't look up at the ceiling to count. She looked straight into Arthur Hemlock's soul. "The square of 4 is 16, she said, speaking rapidly but clearly. 16 multiplied by 425 is 68. You want a 68% tip on the pre-tax amount of $12,800. 68% of 12,000 is 8,160. 68% of 800 is 5,424. Total tip is 8,704. She paused for a microsecond. Add that to the final bill with tax of $14,250.65. 3 seconds, Hemlock shouted, checking his Rolex. 22,954.65, Mina said. Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. Hemlock froze. His mouth was slightly open. He looked down at the napkin, where he had scribbled some numbers, then looked at David. David, check it. David fumbled with his phone, his fingers trembling. He punched in the numbers. 16 times 425 equals 68 times 12 at 800. That's 8,704. Plus 14 down 250.65. David looked up, his face pale. He looked at Hemlock. She's right. It's exactly 22,954.65. A gasp went through the nearby tables. Someone started a slow clap, but Hemlock shot them a look that could kill. Hemlock stared at Mina. His face turned a shade of crimson. He had just been bested at his own game by a woman wearing an apron. Lucky guess, Hemlock spat. You did the math in your head? Impossible. You cheated. It's not luck, Mina said, her voice icy. It's basic arithmetic, and you forgot something. I forgot nothing. You did, Mina said. She reached over and took the gold pen from his hand. He was too stunned to stop her. She flipped the receipt over. You were discussing the Viridian Dynamics acquisition, she said, writing on the back of the receipt. I heard you mention a 14% tax credit on European assets to offset the debt leveraging. Hemlock's eyes widened. That's confidential information. It's loud information, Mina corrected. But your math is wrong there, too. She scribbled a rapid equation. You're calculating the tax credit against the gross asset value. But under the new EU directive WFOTIB, which passed last Tuesday, the credit only applies to net equity after the debt tranche is serviced. If you buy Viridian at $45 a share thinking you're getting a 14% write-off, you're actually only getting 4.5%. She slammed the pen down on the table. Which means, she said, leaning in close to the billionaire, at $45 a share, you're not buying a gold mine. You're losing $300 million in the first quarter. The silence this time wasn't just heavy. It was terrified. Preston dropped his fork. David's jaw was on the floor. Hemlock looked at the numbers she had written. He looked at them for a long time. The color drained from his face. He pulled out his own phone, tapped furiously for a minute, and then stopped. He looked up at Mina. The arrogance was gone. In its place was something else. Fear? Respect? Who are you? He whispered. Mina smoothed her apron. She picked up the tray. I'm just the waitress, Mr. Hemlock, and you owe me $5,000. The silence in Le Ciel didn't last forever, but the vibration of it lingered in the air like the hum of a struck bell. Arthur Hemlock stared at Mina for a moment that stretched into an eternity. His face was a mask of conflict, the warring instincts of a bruised ego and a ruthless capitalist who realized he had just been handed a piece of gold. Slowly, he reached into the inner pocket of his suit jacket. He pulled out a thick money clip. He didn't count the bills. He threw the entire clip onto the table. It landed with a heavy thud next to the untouched tiramisu. Keep the clip, Hemlock muttered. He stood up, buttoning his jacket. Let's go. The wolf pack scrambled to follow him. Preston gave Mina a look of bewildered terror, while David, the analyst, gave her a subtle, quick nod of respect before rushing after his boss. They evacuated the restaurant as if the building were on fire. Mina stood there, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She reached out and picked up the cash. It was a stack of hundreds. It had to be at least $6,000. The relief hit her so hard her knees almost buckled. Mom's medication, the rent, the electricity. It was salvation. Mina, office, now. The voice was Greg's. It wasn't the usual snappy tone. It was the low, dangerous tone of a man trying to save his own skin. Mina stuffed the money into her apron pocket and followed Greg into the cramped, windowless office behind the kitchen. The noise of the dishwashers and the shouting chefs faded as the heavy door slammed shut. Greg paced the small room, running his hands through his gelled hair. He looked like he was about to hyperventilate. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" Greg whispered, his eyes bulging. "Do you have any concept of the disaster you just unleashed?" "I did what you told me to do," Mina said, her adrenaline crashing into fatigue. "I served the customer. He challenged me. I won." "You humiliated Arthur Hemlock," Greg screamed, slamming his hand on the desk. "He is an investor in the hospitality group that owns this restaurant. He knows the owner personally. You didn't just win a bet, Mina. You made a billionaire look like an idiot in front of half of Wall Street." "He was going to stiff me on the tip," Mina argued, her voice rising. "He was bullying me." "He's allowed to bully you. That's why he pays $500 for a steak," Greg retorted. "Rich men like that come here to feel like gods. You're supposed to be the scenery, not the adversary. You broke the illusion." Greg took a deep breath and pointed to the door. "Give me your apron." Mina froze. "Greg, please. I need this job. You know about my mum." "I know," Greg said, and for a split second, he looked genuinely sorry. But fear was a stronger emotion than pity. "But if I keep you on the payroll, Hemlock will make a phone call, and this entire restaurant will be audited, sued, or shut down by next week. He's that kind of petty. I can't risk it. Greg, apron. Now, get out." Mina slowly untied the apron. She placed it on the desk. She felt a strange detachment, a numbness spreading through her limbs. She walked out of the office, past the kitchen line where the cooks refused to make eye contact with her, and out the back door into the alleyway. The New York night air was cold and smelled of garbage and exhaust. Mina leaned against the brick wall and slid down until she was sitting on the pavement. She pulled the roll of cash from her pocket. $5,400, plus the clip, which was solid silver. It was enough to keep them alive for 2 months, but she had no job, and in this city, a resume gap was a death sentence. She closed her eyes and let the memories she usually kept locked away flood back. 3 years ago, Mina Miller wasn't serving steak. She was a doctoral candidate in applied mathematics at Columbia University. She was the girl genius who could visualize stochastic calculus in 4D. She was being courted by NASA and Goldman Sachs. Then came the phone call. Her father, a sweet man who ran a hardware store in Queens, had a massive stroke. He died 2 days later. The grief was a tsunami, but the aftershock was worse. Her mother, Linda, collapsed at the funeral. Diagnosis: glioblastoma, brain cancer, aggressive. The insurance didn't cover the experimental treatments. The hardware store was in debt. Mina made the choice that wasn't really a choice at all. She dropped out of Columbia. She sold the house. She took the first 3 jobs she could find to pay for the chemo, the radiation, the surgeries. She went from analyzing the geometry of black holes to analyzing the geometry of a dinner plate. She stood up, wiping the grit off her black slacks. She couldn't cry. Crying was a variable that didn't solve the equation. She had money in her pocket. She had to get to the hospital. The next morning, Arthur Hemlock sat in his corner office at Hemlock Capital. The view from the 80th floor usually made him feel like a titan. Today, it felt like a glass cage. He hadn't slept. On his mahogany desk sat 2 things: a cup of black coffee and a piece of paper covered in scribbles. He had spent the hours between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. running the numbers on the Viridian Dynamics deal. He had summoned his lead actuary out of bed at 3:30 a.m. The waitress was right. It wasn't just a rounding error. It was a fundamental structural flaw in the deal's tax leveraging strategy. The new EU directive, obscure, buried in bureaucratic jargon, changed the definition of net equity. If Hemlock had signed the deal at 9 a.m. this morning as planned, he would have been exposed to a $320 million liability. She had saved him $1/3 of $1 billion, and she had done it while pouring water. Mr. Hemlock? His assistant, Jessica, stood in the doorway, looking pale. Preston is here, and you need to see this. Preston walked in, holding an iPad like it was a bomb. Arthur, don't freak out. I never freak out, Arthur snapped. What is it? Someone at the restaurant last night. Table 5. They were recording. Arthur felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. He snatched the iPad. It was a TikTok video. The caption read, Waitress destroys Wall Street bro with math and sauce beer to wait the rich. Washed math queen. The video already had 4.2 million views. Arthur watched himself on the screen. He looked red-faced, sweaty, and cruel. The audio was crisp. I want a tip that is exactly equal to the square of the number of people here. And then Mina. Her voice calm, surgical, dismantling him. The camera zoomed in on her face as she said, You're losing $300 million in the first quarter. The comments were brutal. Stock market simp. Holy shit, she cooked him. Eat the Rich 2024. Who is she? Give her a Nobel Prize. Hedge fund tears. Arthur Hemlock just got owned by the working class. You love to see it. Arthur threw the iPad onto the couch. Get this taken down. We can't, Preston said. It's everywhere. Twitter, Reddit, YouTube. The press is already calling. The Post is running a headline. Hemlock poisoned by waiting staff. Arthur stood up and walked to the window. His reputation was his currency. He was the shark, the predator. Now he was the old man who got outsmarted by a girl in an apron. The mockery would impact the fund. Investors would get skittish. If he couldn't do basic math, why should they trust him with their billions? But beneath the anger, the obsession was growing. Who is she? Arthur asked, not turning around. We don't know, Preston stammered. Greg at the restaurant fired her last night. He didn't have her file on hand, just a first name. Mina. Arthur turned. His eyes were cold steel. Find her. I don't care what it costs. Hire a private investigator. Bribe the restaurant manager for her social security number. I want to know who she is, where she lives, and where she learned to calculate tax derivatives in her head. To sue her? Preston asked. Arthur smiled, but there was no humor in it. No. To see if she's real. Nobody does that math in their head. Nobody. She's either a plant from a rival firm, or she's the biggest wasted asset in New York City. Meanwhile, in a cramped apartment in Queens, Mina was boiling water for tea on a hot plate. Her mother, Linda, was asleep in the only bedroom, the sound of her rasping breath filling the small space. Mina's phone buzzed, and buzzed, and buzzed. She picked it up. Dozens of texts. Is that you in the video? OMG Mina, you're famous. Check Twitter. She opened the link her friend sent. She watched the video. Her stomach dropped. She didn't see a victory. She saw a target on her back. Men like Arthur Hemlock didn't let things like this go. She went to the living room, sat on the sagging couch, and opened her laptop. She had to find a job. Fast. She applied to 3 diners, a bookstore, and a tutoring center. But her mind wasn't on it. She kept seeing the equation on the napkin, the beauty of the numbers. For a few minutes last night, she hadn't been a waitress. She had been herself again. The phone rang, an unknown number. Hello? Is this Mina Miller? A man's voice, deep, professional. Who is this? My name is difficult to pronounce, but I work for a recruitment agency that specializes in unique talents. I represent a client who is very interested in your performance last night. I'm not interested in interviews, Mina said, her hand trembling. I just want to be left alone. The client isn't the media, Miss Miller. The client is a competitor of Mr. Hemlock. They saw the video. They want to know if you're looking for a position. Starting salary is $200,000. Mina's breath caught in her throat. $200,000. That was the surgery. That was the debt cleared. That was life. Who is the client? Meet us at the St. Regis Hotel, room 404, tomorrow at noon. Dress professionally. The line went dead. Mina stared at the phone. It felt like a lifeline, or a trap. But when she looked at the closed door of her mother's bedroom, she knew she didn't have the luxury of fear. The St. Regis was a world away from Queens. The lobby dripped with gold leaf and old money. Mina wore her only suit, a charcoal grey ensemble she had bought for her Columbia interviews years ago. It was slightly tight now, and the fabric was worn, but she held her head high. She took the elevator to the 4th floor. Her heart was beating a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Please be real, please be real. She knocked on room 404. The door opened. It wasn't a recruiter. It was Preston, the slick VP from Hemlock's Wolf Pack. Mina turned to run, but 2 large men in suits stepped out of the adjacent room, blocking the hallway. They weren't touching her, but their presence was a wall. Please, Miss Miller, Preston said, stepping back to open the door wider. Mr. Hemlock just wants to talk. If you leave now, the job offer from the competitor, which obviously was us, disappears, along with any chance you have of working in this city again. Arthur can be very thorough. Mina clenched her fists. She was trapped. She turned back to Preston. If I walk in there, I'm recording everything on my phone, she said. Fair enough. Preston nodded. She walked in. The room was a suite, larger than her entire apartment building. Sitting in a velvet armchair by the window, sipping an espresso, was Arthur Hemlock. He didn't look angry. He looked like a scientist studying a lab rat. Mina Miller, Hemlock said, not standing up. Born in Ohio, valedictorian, full ride to MIT, turned down for Columbia, PhD candidate in stochastic modeling, dropout, tragedy, waitress. He tossed a manila folder onto the coffee table. You're not a waitress. You're a tragedy of circumstance. Did you bring me here to read my biography? Mina asked, remaining standing. Or to sue me? I brought you here to ask you a question, Hemlock said. He stood up and walked toward her. How did you know about the EU directive? That wasn't in the news yet. It was in the trade papers, deep in the Brussels legislative logs. Waitresses don't read Brussels legislative logs. I read everything, Mina said. I spend my nights at the library or on my phone. Mathematics is a language, Mr. Hemlock. The market is just a conversation spoken in that language. If you listen, you can hear when someone is lying. The numbers were lying. Hemlock stared at her. You saved me $300 million. You're welcome. I'm not saying thank you, Hemlock snapped. You also cost me my dignity. My investors are laughing at me. The internet is making memes of my face. I have a reputation to maintain. So what do you want? An apology? No, Hemlock grinned. It was a shark's grin. I want a rematch. He gestured to the table. There was a laptop and a stack of files. Next week is the Alpha Summit. It's a gathering of the top hedge fund managers in the world. There's a competition, the Quant Gauntlet. Usually it's just us bragging about our algorithms. But this year, because of you, the organizers have challenged me. They want to know if my Waitress is smarter than their best algorithms. Mina frowned. I'm not your show pony. No, you're not, Hemlock agreed. But you are broke. Your mother, Linda, is at St. Mary's. She needs the new immunotherapy protocol. It costs $80,000 a round. You have... what? 5,000? Mina went cold. You leave my mother out of this. I can't, Hemlock said, because she's your leverage. Here is the deal. You come to the summit. You compete on my team. We face off against the best quants from Goldman, BlackRock, and Citadel. If you win, if you prove that what happened at the restaurant wasn't a fluke, I will pay for your mother's treatment, in full, for as long as she lives. Mina felt the room spin. It was everything she needed, but it came from the devil. And if I lose? She asked. Hemlock's eyes darkened. If you lose, you sign a statement saying the video was staged, that I hired you, that you're an actress. You rehabilitate my image, and you go back to obscurity. You get nothing. You want me to lie? I want my reputation back, Hemlock said. The only way I get it is if I win, or if I own the person who beat me. He held out his hand. One night. High stakes. Life or death for your mother. Reputation or ruin for me. Do we have a deal? Mina looked at his hand. She looked at the luxury around her, bought with the kind of ruthlessness she despised. But then she thought of her mother's rasping breath. She thought of the potential of her own mind, dormant for so long, begging to be used. She didn't shake his hand. I don't need a team, Mina said. I'll represent myself. If I win, you pay the medical bills and you fund a scholarship in my father's name. If I lose, I'll tell the world whatever lie you want. Hemlock raised an eyebrow. Bold. I like it. Done. He reached for the contract on the table. See you at the summit, Mina. Bring a calculator. You're going to need it. The grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel had been transformed into a coliseum of glass and steel. This was the Alpha Summit, the Super Bowl of high finance. The air was frigid, cooled to protect the banks of servers humming backstage, and the lighting was a severe, oceanic blue. In the center of the room stood a circular stage. On it, 3 podiums. On the left, the team from Titanium Analytics, led by Dr. Simon Kress, a man who looked more like a cyborg than a human. He was backed by the Oracle, a predictive AI algorithm that had never lost a market simulation. In the center, the team from Vanguard Global, a group of 5 PhDs from Harvard and Stanford, who treated the market like a physics problem. On the right, Mina Miller, alone. She wore the same charcoal suit, but she had bought a new white blouse. Her hair was pulled back, but a few strands fell loose, framing a face that was pale but set in stone. Behind her, sitting in the VIP box, was Arthur Hemlock. He looked nauseous. He had staked his reputation on a waitress. If she failed, the memes wouldn't just be on Twitter, they would be in the Wall Street Journal. The moderator, a famous financial news anchor, stepped into the spotlight. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the gauntlet. 3 rounds. No calculators allowed for the mental math portions. Predictive models only for the simulation. The winner takes the Golden Bull Trophy and, more importantly, bragging rights for the fiscal year. He turned to the contestants. Dr. Kress represents pure machine learning. The Vanguard team represents academic rigor. And Ms. Miller, well, she represents the wild card. Mr. Hemlock claims she is a savant of the street. Let's see if the street can count. Laughter rippled through the audience. Hundreds of hedge fund managers, bankers, and CEOs watched with amusement. They were there to see a car crash. Round 1. The speed run. The first round is pure mental arithmetic, the moderator announced. Complex derivatives. You have 10 seconds per question. A screen descended. Equations flashed rapidly. Question 1. Calculate the implied volatility of an option pricing at 40.50 with a strike of $100, underlying at $105, and 30 days to expiration. Dr. Kress buzzes immediately. 18.2%. Correct. Question 2. What is the convexity of a bond with a duration of 7 years yielding 5% if yields drop by 50 basis points? Vanguard buzzes. 42.5. Correct. Mina stood silent. The crowd whispered. She's freezing. She doesn't belong here. Hemlock gripped the railing of his box. Come on, Mina, he hissed. Question 3. The screen flashed a nightmare scenario. Calculate the triangular arbitrage profit on $10 million USD given the following cross rates. EUR USD 1.08, GBP EUR 1.15, GBP USD 1.25. Factor in a transaction cost of 0.1% per leg. Dr. Kress hesitated. The AI was crunching, but the human interface was slow. Vanguard was scribbling furiously. Mina hit the buzzer. 0, she said into the microphone. There is no profit. The transaction costs eat the arbitrage spread. You would lose $4,200. The room went silent. The judges checked the numbers. Correct, the moderator said, sounding surprised. Ms. Miller is on the board. For the next 20 minutes, it was a bloodbath. Mina didn't just answer. She anticipated. She treated the numbers like old friends. When asked to calculate compound interest on a distressed asset, she factored in leap years. When asked about currency devaluations, she corrected the moderator's phrasing. By the end of round 1, Vanguard was eliminated. It was down to the machine, Titanium, and the Waitress. Round 2, the Black Swan. Round 2 is the simulation, the moderator boomed. We are going to simulate a global market crash, a pandemic combined with a cyber attack on the banking grid. You have access to a terminal. You must construct a portfolio that survives the first 30 minutes of trading. The highest equity value wins. Dr. Kress smiled. This was his territory. His AI, the Oracle, could execute 4,000 trades a second. It would short the market instantly. Mina stared at her screen. She didn't have an AI. She had her brain. Begin! On the giant screens above, the simulation began. Red lines plummeted. The virtual Dow Jones fell 2,000 points in seconds. Dr. Kress's screen was a blur of activity. The AI was shorting airlines, buying gold, and dumping tech stocks. His portfolio value stabilized, then began to rise. Mina did nothing. Ms. Miller is inactive? The moderator noted. She hasn't made a single trade. Hemlock stood up. Mina, short the market. Do something, he screamed, forgetting decorum. Mina sat with her hands folded. She watched the news ticker on the simulation screen. Rumors of bank runs. ATMs freezing. 2 minutes passed. The market hit bottom. Kress was up 15%. Then the simulation shifted. The government announced a total freeze on electronic withdrawals to stop the cyber attack. Kress's AI panicked. It had bought gold futures, electronic gold. But in a freeze, electronic assets became illiquid. The AI tried to sell, but the simulated market had zero liquidity. Kress's portfolio locked up. The value started plummeting as the panic algorithm set in. Mina's hands finally moved. She typed one command. She didn't buy stocks. She didn't buy gold. She bought consumer staples and physical logistics. Specifically, companies that made toilet paper, canned goods, and trucking fleets. And she bought them using cash reserves she had held back, bypassing the electronic freeze logic of the game. The simulation ended. Dr. Kress's portfolio. 12% frozen assets. Mina Miller's portfolio, plus 142%. The crowd gasped. How? Kress shouted, slamming his desk. The model predicted a flight to safety. Gold is safety. Mina leaned into the microphone. Her voice was calm, amplified across the silent hall. "Machines look for logic," she said. "But panic isn't logical. Panic is biological. When people can't get money out of an ATM, they don't care about gold futures. They care about feeding their children. I didn't bet on the market. I bet on fear." The room erupted. It wasn't polite applause anymore. It was a roar. Hemlock sat down, stunned. He wasn't just relieved, he was awestruck. She hadn't used math. She had used psychology, encoded as math. "Round 3. The final variable. One final question," the moderator said. "Winner takes all. This is a game theory problem." He walked to the center of the stage. "You have 2 sealed envelopes. One contains $10,000. The other contains $0. You can negotiate with your opponent. You can lie, you can tell the truth. You must decide to split or steal. If both split, you each get $5,000. If one steals and one splits, the stealer gets $10,000. If both steal, you both get nothing." It was the classic prisoner's dilemma, but played live. Dr. Kress looked at Mina. He sneered. "I'm a rational actor," he said. "The Nash equilibrium dictates that I should steal, because if you split, I win big. If you steal, I lose nothing more than if I had split. Mathematically, I must steal." He locked in his choice. Mina looked at Kress. She walked over to his podium. She turned off her microphone, but the cameras zoomed in. "You're a rational actor," Mina whispered, loud enough for Kress to hear, but not the crowd. "But your investors aren't. If you steal from a waitress on live TV, even if you win the game, your fund will lose its soul. You'll be the villain. Your outflows next quarter will be in the billions." Kress froze. He hadn't calculated the PR variable. "But," Mina continued, "if you split, you look like a benevolent genius who shared the stage with the underdog. You lose the game, but you win the narrative." Mina walked back to her podium. She locked in her choice. The moderator counted down. 3, 2, 1. Reveal. Dr. Kress's screen. Split. Mina Miller's screen. Steal. The crowd screamed. I, Kress stammered. "You tricked me. You said—" "I explained the variables," Mina said, taking the Golden Bull trophy the host handed her. "I never said what I was going to do." She had manipulated the manipulator. She had used his own vanity against him. She had won. The after-party was a blur of champagne and camera flashes, but Mina stayed for none of it. She took the check, the prize money from the summit, plus a personal check from Arthur Hemlock for the medical bills, and walked out the side door. Hemlock found her waiting for a taxi on 61st Street. It was raining. "You're leaving?" Hemlock asked. He looked different. The armor of arrogance had a crack in it. "Everyone wants to meet you. Goldman wants to offer you a job. I want to offer you a job. Name your price, Mina." 500,000? $1 million? Mina turned up the collar of her cheap coat. She looked at the billionaire who had tried to crush her 3 days ago. "I don't want a job, Arthur." "Why? You belong here. You proved that today. You're a shark." "No," Mina said softly. "I'm not a shark. I'm a survivor. There's a difference. Sharks eat because they're hungry. Survivors eat because they have to." She opened her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was the original receipt from Le Ciel. "I have a confession," she said. Hemlock frowned. "What?" "That night at the restaurant. It wasn't an accident." Hemlock stopped. "What do you mean?" "I knew you were coming," Mina said. The rain plastered a strand of hair to her cheek. "I switched shifts with Jenna. I memorized the Viridian Dynamic Steel specs 2 nights before, when the news leaked on a subreddit forum I follow. I knew you were looking at them. I knew you were arrogant. And I knew you were sloppy with your tax math." Hemlock stared at her, the raindrops beading on his expensive suit. You set me up." "I baited the hook," Mina corrected. "I needed $80,000 for my mother. I knew I couldn't get a loan. I knew I couldn't get a job interview with a gap in my resume. So I created a situation where you would have to notice me. I didn't just solve the math, Arthur. I engineered the entire evening." A slow, incredulous smile spread across Arthur Hemlock's face. He wasn't angry. He was delighted. It was the most respect he had ever felt for another human being. "You hustled me," he whispered. "You hustled Arthur Hemlock." "I did the math," Mina said. "The probability of you tipping big was low. The probability of you engaging in an ego battle was high. I bet on your ego." A taxi pulled up. Mina opened the door. "Keep your job, Arthur," she said. "I'm going to finish my PhD. And then I'm going to start a fund. A fund for the people you ignore. The waitresses, the truck drivers, the people who understand the price of milk better than your algorithms ever will." "What are you going to call it?" Hemlock asked. Mina smiled. It was the first genuine smile she had shown him. "Table 1. She got in the cab. The door slammed. Hemlock stood in the rain, watching the tail lights fade into the New York traffic. He looked down at the check in his hand, the consulting fee she had refused to take. He put it back in his pocket. He took out his phone and dialed his office. "Preston, it's me. Cancel the Viridian deal. And get me the prospectus for a new scholarship fund. I want to donate. Anonymous. Yeah, call it the Miller Grant." Epilogue. 6 months later. The bell at Le Ciel chimed. Greg, the manager, looked up from his podium. He froze. Walking in wasn't a waitress. It was Mina Miller. She looked radiant. Her hair was down, and she wore a tailored cream suit that screamed quiet luxury. Beside her walked an older woman, frail but walking on her own, smiling. Linda. "Mina," Greg stammered. We don't have a table." "I know," Mina said. "I didn't come to eat." She walked past him, straight to table 1, the corner booth. It was empty. She placed a heavy leather-bound book on the table. "Tell Mr. Hemlock I left this for him," she said to Greg. "What is it?" "My doctoral thesis," Mina said. "It's dedicated to him." She turned to leave, her arm linked with her mother's. "Mina," Greg called out. "Where are you working now?" Mina paused at the door. She looked back at the restaurant, the place of her humiliation and her resurrection. "I don't work, Greg," she said, her eyes twinkling. "I solve problems, and business is booming." She walked out into the sunlight. On table 1, the thesis cover caught the light. The title read, "The Human Variable. Why Arrogance is a Liability in Stochastic Systems," by Dr. Mina Miller. They thought she was just a waitress. They thought she was invisible. But Mina Miller proved that intelligence isn't defined by your job title or your bank account. It's defined by how you use what you have when the pressure is on. She didn't just beat the billionaire at his own game. She rewrote the rules entirely. In a world full of algorithms and artificial intelligence, she reminded us that the most dangerous variable of all is a determined human being fighting for someone they love. So, the next time you're at a restaurant, be careful who you underestimate. The person pouring your coffee might just be the smartest person in the room. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Did you see that twist coming? Let me know in the comments below. Would you have taken the job, or did Mina make the right choice? Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story about the underdogs taking over the world. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.